This podcast includes discussion of rape and sexual assault, abuse, murder, and other criminal behavior. Listener discretion is advised. South Ogden Police Sergeant Terry Carpenter drove into downtown Ogden on the afternoon of April 10, 1991. He headed to a building on Washington Boulevard, which housed the offices of the Utah Department of Social Services. The offices where Doug Lovell's ex-wife, Rhonda, worked.
Kind of out of the clear blue, went into work one day and said, Rhonda, let's level with each other.
Terry saying this came out of the clear blue was perhaps an oversimplification. So let's back up just a step. Terry was at the time in the spring of '91 pursuing a long-shot lead in the Joyce Yost case. It centered on a claim Joyce had died at the hands of a satanic coven. This tip had come from a woman named Barbara, as I described in the last episode. In this next clip, you will hear Barbara say she knew a contract had been put out on Joyce by a guy named Love.
I was told that there had been a contract and that her name was Joyce Yost and that I shouldn't tell anyone or I would be in pretty serious trouble.
Terry had spent weeks trying to verify this. He had scoured a gravel pit, searching for bones. He had told Barbara her information was the most valuable and pressing available in the case. There were no other leads.
If I had other leads that were more valuable and more pressing, those would be the areas I'd be concentrating on. Do you think I would have sat on this group that you're involved with for the last several weeks if I had something better that I had to work on? I don't, and this is the most prominent thing that is here right now, and it's very realistic and it's very feasible.
But in truth, the coven lead was fast turning into a dead end, which is part of what prompted Terry's impromptu visit to Rhonda's work.
You talk to both of them, hoping at some point they may cross or that there might be some ties there or that there might be some indication that, yes, Barbara's telling you the absolute truth.
Rhonda and Terry sat down in the office break room. She told Terry about her divorce. They reminisced about the time 5 years earlier when Terry had taken Rhonda to jail on the poaching warrant. Her story of that poaching situation had evolved somewhat in the time since. She now told Terry Doug had gone up to Monte Cristo the night before their encounter with the wildlife officer and shot 2 deer. He'd wanted to retrieve the antlers, so he had dragged her up there the next day for that purpose. Rhonda insisted again, as she had before, she had no knowledge of what had happened to Joyce Yost. Terry fixed her with a stare. Then he said,
We know that Doug killed Joyce. We know that you're involved. We know that you helped him to some extent. And provided that you didn't pull the trigger, we can get you immunity. And she says, oh, he didn't shoot her. He just stomped on her throat. And then she went, like I really blew it.
This was not at all the break Terry might have expected. He had sudden clarity. The story Barbara had told about the coven was in no way true.
She thinks Joyce Yost was killed by her dad and the coven, and just didn't happen.
It didn't happen because Doug had killed Joyce himself. Rhonda had kept that secret for years. It had gnawed at her. Ever since her divorce, she'd considered coming forward. But how could she do that without ending up in prison herself?
And then she almost immediately started to cry. And I said, Rhonda, we can help you.
Terry repeated his promise. He would do everything he could to secure immunity.
And so we talked and we talked and we talked, and she got 2,000 pounds off of her chest.
Terry's breakthrough with Rhonda hadn't come by way of intimidation, technology, or clever tactics. It had simply resulted from his offer of empathy and her willingness to trust.
She's she's, I've interviewed hundreds of people and know she's cleaning her soul. She's telling me what the truth is.
That was no small step on Rhonda's part. She knew what Doug had done to the last woman who had crossed him. Terry promised not to let that happen again. This is Cold, Season 2, Episode 6. Here We Are. From KSL Podcasts, I'm Dave Cawley. We'll be right back. Terry Carpenter had knocked the frost off the cold case of Joyce Yost's disappearance. He took his breakthrough to the Weber County attorney the day after his meeting with Rhonda Buttars.
They're excited. They're finally willing to say, we've got enough evidence now to go forward, but they still have to prove it.
That was complicated by the fact Rhonda and Doug had been husband and wife at the time of Joyce's murder. Utah law provided Rhonda spousal privilege, which meant
we can't compel her to testify. She has to do that of her own free will.
Rhonda, I should mention, did not respond to an interview request for this podcast. Neither did her children. But Rhonda showed her free will by meeting with Terry Carpenter again on the evening of May 1st, 1991 for an on-the-record interview.
Has anyone pressured you into doing this, Rhonda? Have I made any threats against you or promises to you except for the immunity?
No promises except immunity.
Okay.
They went step by step through the events of the night Joyce Yost died. Rhonda described driving Doug over to Joyce's apartment in her blue Pontiac 1000 hatchback sometime between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. Her daughter Alicia, then 4 years old, had been in the back seat, asleep.
Can you tell me why you dropped him off?
His intentions were he was going to break in Joyce's apartment to kill her.
Okay. Did he tell you that?
Yes.
You knew that that's what he had planned to do?
Yes.
Rhonda said she and Doug had been there before. She had taken him by Joyce's apartment at least twice during the summer of '85. He had discovered the broken lock on the window during one of those visits. On the night of the murder, Rhonda said she had driven east on 40th Street to the intersection with Evelyn Road. She had flipped around and come to a stop about 350 feet up the street from Joyce's apartment. Doug had popped open the passenger door and stepped out into the dark, telling Rhonda he would call her later. So Rhonda went home. She put Alicia to bed, then went to sleep herself. Her phone rang hours later. Rhonda said it was probably sometime between 4 and 5 a.m. She answered. It was Doug. He told her he was in the canyon.
Okay, is that what he told you? I'm in the canyon?
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Yes. He said, I'm in the canyon, and by the time you get to the Wilshire, I'll be there. We'll probably meet there at the same time. And he said, I want you to follow me so I can catch the car.
The Wilshire Theater was a 3-screen movie house, a kind of old community landmark in South Ogden, right on the main drag of Harrison Boulevard. The Wilshire was only 2 miles away from Doug and Rhonda's apartment.
But, okay, and then, I got dressed, got my little girl, put her in the car. I went to the Wilshire, and he was already at Wilshire in the parking lot waiting for me. And so I pulled up to him.
Where was he driving?
Joyce's car.
Doug had a nylon stocking pulled over his hair and was wearing gloves. "What took you so long?" he asked. "I beat you here and I came clear from the canyon." Doug ordered Rhonda to follow him. He started east, through a quiet neighborhood at the foot of the Wasatch Mountains, headed up the hill. Rhonda followed the red glow of taillights, up Combie Road to Melanie Lane. The street climbed until it could go up no more. They were at the edge of the city. Nothing above it but mountain, 4,000 vertical feet of scrub oak and scree. Rhonda parked her car and waited, while Doug steered Joyce's car off of the asphalt onto a dirt track that disappeared into the brush. The track, out of sight of the road, climbed up to a squat water tank.
He drove up by the water tower and I stayed on the road to wait for him to come down.
A car went past, leaving Rhonda to wonder what she would say if anyone stopped to ask her what she was doing there. But that car didn't stop. When Doug returned, he was on foot and carrying a large blue suitcase. He stuffed that into the back of the Pontiac before settling into the passenger seat. He instructed Rhonda to head back down to Highway 89 and go south. Rhonda noted her husband seemed a little nervous, but not much considering what he had just done. And yes, he told her the story as she drove.
He said he broke in the apartment and she was laying on her bed and she was asleep, and I think he said the TV was on and the light was on. And it was like she fell asleep watching TV. And he said he had a knife with him, and when he went to reach over to grab her by the mouth so she wouldn't scream, that he cut her hand. And so he said he got her up and he was washing her hand and trying to get all the evidence and everything, the blood and everything, so no one would know that she had been bleeding.
Rhonda said Doug had made Joyce strip the sheets after wrapping her hand. When he had tried to mop up the blood on the mattress with the washcloth, he had found it simply made the stain even larger. So he had flipped the blood-stained mattress and remade the bed with a fresh set of sheets.
And she was, begging, let's just call Burge and I'll tell him whatever you want me to say, that you really didn't rape me or whatever. But Doug was afraid that she would call Burge and then say that he was trying to rape me again. So Doug was just telling her, it's okay, I'm just going to take you to some people and hide you out for a while, because there was a court date coming up and he didn't want her to be there, I guess.
Rhonda said Doug had made Joyce pack some clothes and makeup into a suitcase, as if she were just going on a trip.
Doug kept telling her that, I'm not going to hurt you, I'm just going to take you to these people. So then, I guess after he got her hand wrapped, he got in her car and he said he made her drive up the canyon. And they went up by Causey, and he said he didn't go far off the road, he just stopped the car and got her out of the car and walked up this hill, and it wasn't very far off the road, and grabbed her neck and was choking her, and then I think he stepped on her neck, stomped on it, and smashed it.
By Rhonda's account, Doug had killed Joyce with his own bare hands.
How much of that's true, I don't know.
Terry told me he believed Rhonda was being honest with him.
Rhonda's a meek, mellow person, and there's no way that she was making any of that up.
But he doubted Doug had been completely honest with her.
We know that's not how he killed her because of all the blood that was between the mattress. He killed her in the apartment. He didn't take her up on the mountain to kill her.
But which mountain? Where was Joyce? Rhonda didn't seem to know, aside from it being somewhere near Causey Reservoir.
And he said he buried her as best he could. He didn't have any anything to really bury her, like a shovel to dig a hole that I recall. And he said he didn't bury her very deep. But he just, like put leaves or shrubbery or dirt over her. And she had her purse at the time, he said, and he dumped all of her stuff out by her purse, and then just left it. And he was saying, that was a mistake. He shouldn't have left her purse, her ID, or everything that was in her purse was right there by her body.
Rhonda said Doug acknowledged he would have to go back and fix that mistake.
And then he went back a week or so later because it was bow hunting season and was afraid somebody'd find her laying on the ground. And that's when he buried her.
But let's not get too far ahead. As the eastern sky started to take on the soft hue of impending sunrise on the morning after the murder, Rhonda had chauffeured Doug to a vacant lot at the intersection of Highway 89 and Oak Hills Drive in the city of Layton.
And then he got out, and there was a camp area, and where there's a fire, he started the suitcase on fire. I don't know if he did the suitcase, I can't remember, because the suitcase seemed like it would take forever to burn. I just remember the clothes for sure. He burned the clothes.
Rhonda waited in her car as Doug tended the fire, the growing light of dawn gaining in intensity with each passing minute. Rhonda said she then drove him to a spot along the Weber River where he tossed the suitcase into the water. Then they went home. At some point that morning, Doug had discovered his pants and shoes were stained with Joyce's blood. So he and Rhonda had left the apartment and drove to a place where Riverdale Road crosses the Union Pacific Railroad's Riverdale Yard. Doug ducked under the viaduct, where he found a large drum or barrel. He put his blood-stained Levi's in it, then set fire to them and walked away.
You indicated that Doug told you he was going up to get rid of Joyce. You knew that that's why he was going up there. Have you ever talked about doing that before to anyone else?
Yes, he talked to his friend Billy Jack.
Further evidence of Rhonda's forthrightness.
Rhonda starts to talk about the fact that he's paid people to do this. And so other names come out.
Rhonda told Terry how Billy Jack had sawed the barrel off a stolen gun, chickened out, and buried the weapon in a field near Joyce's apartment. She told Terry about meeting with Tom Peters at his girlfriend's place in Salt Lake City, how Doug had turned an entire workman's comp check over to Tom in the hopes he would take care of Joyce, how Tom had taken the money but failed to do the job. She described how Doug ended up trying to pawn Joyce's wristwatch, the one he had left with her body but later retrieved. No pawn shop would offer him more than $50, so he had tossed it out the car window while driving down State Street in Salt Lake City one day. Terry asked Rhonda if she was concerned at all about what they had discussed.
I'm worried about if Doug finds out, I'm really scared.
What will Doug do?
He'll have someone come after me.
And what do you think they'd do?
Kill me.
Okay, you believe that, Rhonda?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Rhonda took a polygraph, which showed she was being truthful. And she continued to feed information to Terry. She told him Doug had not stopped calling her in spite of their divorce. Terry asked if she would be willing to record those phone calls. Rhonda said yes. Shirley Lovell, Doug's mom, died as a result of a pulmonary embolism on Friday, May 17, 1991. She was 55 years old. The family planned funeral services for the following Tuesday, May 21st, in Oak City, Utah, the tiny rural community where both she and Doug's father had been raised and where Doug had spent his own early years. Doug made an immediate request to the prison staff. He wanted to attend the funeral. The Utah Department of Corrections at that time classified Doug as a Level 3 inmate. The medium security ranking meant he had to remain within the prison perimeter at all times. Only level 5s could leave the grounds. Still, Doug believed he had a strong case for an exception. His file, also known as his jacket, didn't include any write-ups for serious violations. He was neat and polite. He didn't brawl, he'd never tried to escape, and he worked hard at his job in the prison sign shop. He had become a lead man with his own office. Carl Jacobson, who had been one of Doug's guards when he had first arrived in SSD back in '86, often introduced him to visitors there. Carl had developed something of a rapport with Doug over the years. He had since promoted to the rank of lieutenant. Managing visitation inside and outside the prison fell within Carl's new responsibilities. Carl might have been the closest thing to an ally Doug had among the prison staff. But when he received the request for an off-site visit, it gave him pause. Doug, Carl believed, presented a flight risk. If given the opportunity, he might use the funeral to stage an escape. While prison managers debated the question of whether to approve the funeral trip, Doug received a visitor at the prison. On the morning of Monday, May 20th, his boss at the sign shop told him his attorney was waiting to speak with him. Doug was at that time working to appeal his sentence in court. A new lawyer, Robert Archuleta, had signed on to help him. But that's not who was waiting for Doug when he made his way over to the prison offices. It was Terry Carpenter.
Doug was advised of his rights per Miranda, at which time Doug was asked if he understood each of these rights, and he stated that he did.
Terry didn't make a tape recording of the conversation itself, but he did record these notes afterward.
With these rights in mind, would you be willing to talk with me? And he stated no.
Terry told Doug that was fine. He should just sit and listen. He then explained new information had come to light about the death of Joyce Yost. He now knew enough to secure a capital homicide charge.
Doug refused to talk about it. I told him that I knew that he was involved in this. He stated, "No, you're wrong. I don't have anything to do with it. There is absolutely nothing that I know about the disappearance of Joyce Yost."
Terry said he knew Doug had arranged to have Joyce killed and that a, quote, payment was made.
Doug shook his head, again denied any knowledge of it, and stated he would gladly go to trial.
Terry had one other tactic to try. He told Doug the Department of Corrections was not going to let him attend his mother's funeral. But he could make it happen.
The time that I approached him knowing that his mother had just passed away and hoping that there may be some feelings there of remorse, or that he may be in a frame of mind more willing to talk to me regarding the death of Joyce Yost, knowing that she was also someone's mother.
Terry said if Doug wanted to go, he had to first give up the location of Joyce's body.
He just flat adamantly denies anything. He doesn't have anything to do with it. He has no knowledge of it, and just flat tells me that I'm wrong.
Doug responded by saying, "F you."
You sit and look at him and know without a question that he's lying to you. And you can just flat see the devil in his eyes.
Doug told Terry he couldn't keep him there. Then he stood and walked out of the room. Terry wasn't done at the prison, though. He had the guards haul in another inmate, Tom Peters. He had only just learned of Doug and Tom's friendship from Rhonda.
How did he know Tom?
He knew Tom from last time when he was in prison.
Terry proceeded to tell Tom he was aware Doug had paid him to take care of Joyce Yost. Tom, in response, suggested a hypothetical. Suppose, he said, a friend came to another friend and offered to pay to have a woman taken care of. The second friend agrees to the point of taking the money, but with no intention of ever killing anyone.
And then Mr. Peters' tense changes, and he says, I took the money. At the time, I was and he says it just that way, this person at that time was a heroin addict, and he took the money for the purpose of getting high on heroin. And that's exactly what I did. My girlfriend and I, and then he realizes again that he's changed tenses. He stops and he says, this person and his girlfriend then took the money and went out and got high on heroin with no intentions whatsoever of having anything to do with the murder.
Terry asked Tom if he would tell that story from the witness stand.
And Tom thought for a minute and he said, no, I can't deny it. It's true, but I will invoke my right. And I says, you mean your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, to avoid incriminating yourself? And he said, yes.
Tom said he had good reason to worry. Doug Lovell was not his friend.
Tom indicated to me that he was afraid of problems from Doug. He says, if I can see him coming, I'll be okay. But Doug's the type that he will come up and get you from behind.
Shirley Lovell's funeral came and went. Doug did not attend. The swelter of the southern Nevada afternoon had started to recede from the Moapa Valley. Heat radiated from the scorched ground, even as twinkling stars emerged in the violet blanket of the clear desert sky. Ron and Deb Barney were at home in Logandale, a small community between I-15 and Lake Mead, about 50 miles northeast of Las Vegas. Just after 9 p.m. on May 23, 1991, they heard a knock at the door. When they answered, they found two men standing on the doorstep, Sergeant Terry Carpenter and Lieutenant Val Shoup of the South Ogden, Utah Police Department. The Barneys invited the officers inside to talk. Terry had learned Ron was one of Doug's closest friends. He told Ron he would soon be arresting Doug for the murder of Joyce Yost.
Mr. Barney indicated to me that he didn't believe in any way, shape, or form Doug Lovell was involved, that he was a good person.
Terry did not record the conversation. Again, only these notes after the fact.
We talked in some detail about the fact that this good person had committed a series of armed robberies, that this good person had committed a very brutal rape upon a woman, that this good person had been poaching.
Deb scooted their kids to bed as it became clear the conversation was turning to more sensitive matters.
He had some question about whether he raped the woman or not. Doug had told them that they actually just had sex together and the woman wanted the relationship to go further, and Doug said no, and she got mad and screamed rape.
Terry countered this, explaining in some detail how the evidence showed Doug's assault on Joyce had not been consensual.
And I made the comment that, yeah, whenever Doug is on dope, that's what happens to him. And Debbie immediately made the statement that Doug doesn't do drugs.
Terry said yes, Doug did do drugs, the prescription kind. There was the matter of Doug's phony back injury during the summer of '85, for which he had obtained several prescriptions.
Also indicated that the night that Joyce disappeared, that Doug was taking a very strong drug, at that time allegedly for his back, which there is much in question as to whether the back problem is a legitimate deal or just a guise for him to receive some kind of drugs while he's in prison.
And how about the issue of the stolen guns? The ones Doug and Billy Jack had taken from the home of Cody Montgomery in May of '85. The ones they had buried behind the cabin near Callio.
I asked Mr. Barney if he had any knowledge about Doug burying some guns. Ron paused for probably 10 seconds and stared at the table, and then says, well, yeah, he did tell me about some stolen guns. He buried them someplace. I'm not sure where he buried them.
Terry already knew where the guns had come from, and where at least some had ended up.
And Ron was very hesitant to talk about them.
Doug had told the Barneys he expected a judge would soon overturn his sentence. They had discussed having him come to stay at their place in Nevada once he won his freedom. Terry asked if that's really what they wanted, considering how Doug had been convicted of armed robbery, how he had kidnapped and sexually assaulted a woman, how he had stolen guns and cars, how he had poached deer.
With that understanding, they began to think, and Debbie made the comment that she was concerned about her children, that they had become fairly good friends with Doug, and that they had some major concerns about Doug coming to live with them.
In the week following his mother's funeral, Doug Lovell came across a newspaper story that caught his attention. It dealt with another inmate at the Utah State Prison, a man named James Carlos Foote. Foote had been charged with sexually abusing a child in '84, when he had touched a 6-year-old girl while lifting her into his truck. Foote, who had no prior criminal history, cut a plea deal and received a sentence of 1 to 15 years in prison. Parole board guidelines suggested the punishment for Foote's crime should have been 2 years of incarceration. He had gone before the board 3 times since arriving at the prison, and was each time peppered with questions about other cases of child sex abuse in which he might have been involved. Foote denied having any sexual contact with any other children. As a result, the board determined he was not being forthcoming and declined to grant him a release date. Foote filed suit against the board, claiming his estranged wife, who worked for the Utah Department of Corrections, had added unfounded accusations about him abusing other neighborhood children to his file. He said the board was essentially punishing him for crimes he had not been convicted of, depriving him of his constitutional right to due process. His lawsuit had made its way to the Utah Supreme Court in November of 1990. In its ruling in March of '91, the High Court justices unanimously agreed due process rules did apply to the Board of Pardons, same as to the courts. In other words, Foote had a right to know what was in his file and to challenge it. So in May of '91, after serving more than 6 years, Foote filed a second lawsuit. That's what had landed his story in the paper and before the curious eyes of Doug Lovell. Doug saw parallels to his own situation. He believed Judge Rodney Page had sentenced him for murdering Joyce, not for kidnapping and sexually assaulting her. And Doug had not been able to review the pre-sentence report Page relied on when making his decision. Doug had a friendly prison guard make a copy of the newspaper story. He placed it in an envelope and addressed it to Rhonda. Then he called her, and Rhonda rolled tape, starting this recording.
Hello? Hi. Hi.
Not to discuss his own mother's funeral, which Rhonda had attended without him days earlier, but to share the good news.
Because see, now when I go to the board, they can't even ask. They can't even make a mere statement. You know, what do you know about Joyce? They can't even ask that anymore because of what's been ruled.
Yeah.
And a lot of things are swinging now in my favor. And I think they've always been hoping that, that when I eventually went to the board, if I lost my appeal, if I went to the board could say, hey, what about this? And then keep me here for X amount of years longer. And now that can't happen.
Doug had more good news for Rhonda. He told her about his new attorney, Robert Archuleta. Robert was already trying to track down a copy of Doug's pre-sentence report, so they could go about challenging what was in it. That wasn't the only update he had to share.
Together, I guess Carpenter's been assigned to the case.
Who?
Carpenter. Terry Carpenter.
Rhonda did not let on she was by then well acquainted with Terry Carpenter. Doug didn't bother to ask, continuing right on describing their meeting the day before the funeral.
Said, I got nothing, I got no statement. I told him if you want to turn the recorder on, I'll tell you that, I'm going to tell you right now. I don't know anything about it. I wasn't involved directly or indirectly in it. And I says, and I don't know, and I don't think anybody else even knows that this woman is deceased. I says, now if you want me to make that kind of a statement, I will. He says, well, it's not what I'm looking for. I said, well, then what you want is for me to say something that's not true. What you want me to do is say that I was involved in something that I wasn't. And I can't do that.
Rhonda mentioned a detective had dropped by her apartment on the day of the funeral, but she wasn't at home.
So they're probably trying to look for me, too.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised they haven't got a hold of you by now. I figured you would have been the first one that they got a hold of.
At no point during any of this did Doug take a moment to express grief or sadness over the loss of his mother. The following week, after Memorial Day, he called Rhonda again. This time he did want to talk about his mom, or at least her life insurance. Doug said it appeared he and his brother Russ were poised to split about $81,000. The money would mean he was all set for when he got out. Rhonda told Doug Carpenter had showed up at her apartment with a search warrant.
Well, I got a visit last night.
Did you?
Yep, they came and searched the house and went through everything.
Did you let them?
Yeah, they had a warrant.
Did they really?
Yep.
What did they find? What did they take?
Some pictures.
What kind of pictures?
Hunting pictures. Polaroids of Doug, Rhonda, and Billy Jack at the cabin near Callio.
I don't know how many they took, but they took some. I'm not sure which ones. I think, well, of like everybody, your friends. They want to know their names and stuff.
No kidding.
Yep.
Doug didn't seem to like this one bit.
Huh. Did they try to question you?
No, not really. They just said they'd get back with me. They just want to do a search. That's basically what they were doing.
The topic of these pictures would come up again and again in the days that followed. At one point, Rhonda told Doug his life would be easier if he just told the truth. He brushed off that suggestion, saying he wanted the photos back as soon as possible.
Well, I don't think they'll keep them. Why are you worried?
He didn't answer the question. But he did urge Rhonda to come visit him that weekend. All of this action in the case had him wanting to talk to her, face to face, not over the phone, where they might be monitored. So it came as a disappointment when he called Rhonda on Sunday, June 2nd. The weather was bad in Utah, and Rhonda told Doug she wasn't going to drive down to the prison for a visit. Maybe next week. Doug couldn't wait. He took a risk and brought up in a roundabout way the topic of Joyce.
You shocked me by something you said the other day. What? About the truth.
Why?
I just couldn't believe you said that. You blows me away, totally away.
Why? What do you mean?
That you would ask me to do something like that.
Hello? Why?
You know you're asking.
I guess not.
There was a lot of static on this part of the call, and it's difficult to understand even after aggressive noise reduction. What Doug said there was he was shocked by Rhonda's suggestion he tell the truth. He asked if she knew what she was asking. Rhonda said, "I guess not." Rhonda then tried a different approach. In this next clip, you will hear her tell Doug she wondered how he lived with it. You will hear Doug say, "In all honesty, Rhonda, what I have lived with for years is far worse than that."
I don't know, I just wonder how you live with him.
In all honesty, Rhonda, what I've been living with for years is far worse than that.
What does that mean?
What could Doug have possibly been referring to? Doug said he didn't want to talk about it. It was a subject he only addressed with Kate Della Piana, his prison therapist. Listen again, and you will hear Doug say, on a scale of 1 to 10, this doesn't even rate, and I've lived with it for a long time.
But I can assure you that this doesn't even, on a scale of 1 to 10, doesn't even rate. And I've lived with for a long time.
Whatever this other mystery problem was, he didn't provide specifics. He only would say it caused him a great deal of shame and guilt. At this, Rhonda again said it was perhaps time to spill his guts, to get it all out. Doug said, "Get what out? I didn't do anything." This triggered an argument, with Doug telling Rhonda he worried about her and what she might do.
You've never been through this, Rhonda.
Well, excuse me. So should I do it just to experience it or what?
No. And don't try to fight with me.
I'm not, man. Don't try and fight with me.
I'm not.
Yeah, you are.
In frustration, Doug told Rhonda he didn't know her anymore. She agreed, saying they just weren't on the same wavelength. Time apart, she said, does that to people. A quick note before returning to the story. The back half of this episode includes some very rough sections of tape, stuff that normally wouldn't make the cut because of how difficult to understand it is. But it's critical information and needs to stay in. I'll be restating the most important parts, but you can also follow along with text using the full episode transcript available at thecoldpodcast.com. Doug Lovell's new attorney called Rhonda Buttars late in the day on Friday, June 14th, 1991.
Hello?
Is this Rhonda?
Yes.
Oh, Rhonda, this is Attorney Robert Archuleta.
Uh-huh.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Robert apologized for not having his notes in front of him, a fact made clear when he referred to Joyce Yost as Janet Riost. He explained he had talked to Terry Carpenter about his recent visit to Doug at the prison.
I did get some information out of this Detective Carpenter. He said he'd talked with 4 people who had discussions with Mr. Lovell about, I suppose, having her executed or murdered. And, and this guy, I think he's lying to me about that.
That's because Robert said Doug had consistently denied any involvement with Joyce's disappearance.
Doug seems like a pretty nice guy to me.
Yeah, he is. He's a good guy. Nice guy.
Yeah, that's what I think, too. I mean, I don't know anything about your relationship, but otherwise he seems like a pretty good guy, and he insists he didn't do this. He says, no, I didn't kill anyone.
Robert asked Rhonda if she had ever been questioned by the police.
Ever? Yeah, Birch did years and years ago.
Waste of time. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much true, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
I mean, you don't know any more than you've told me.
Right.
Rhonda didn't tell Robert about her more recent conversations with Terry Carpenter. She only mentioned Terry had showed up at her apartment with a search warrant. She explained how Terry had seized photos of Doug and his friends.
And who were your friends?
They took some of Tom Peters, Billy Jack, Devin
Tom Peters, that's it. That's the one that they alleged. Billy Jack, did you say?
Uh-huh.
Who else?
Deb and Ron Barney.
Robert told Rhonda if Terry came back around asking any more questions, she should refuse to answer. He said the police were simply shaking the tree to see what might fall out.
See, they made some pretty outlandish things about them. They told me that they think Doug has killed 2 people.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh. And somehow they've alleged in somewhere that he was part of this automobile theft ring.
Rhonda played ignorant, saying Doug hadn't really been in trouble with the law that much prior to the rape case.
Okay, otherwise, did you have a pretty good marriage?
Yeah.
It's all right?
It was all right, yeah.
Later that same night, Doug called Rhonda. She told him about her conversation with Robert.
I felt like I was on trial. God, 20 questions, man.
From him?
Yeah.
The attorney?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's good, Rhonda.
Doug said Robert also wanted to represent him if South Ogden police made good on the threat of filing a capital homicide charge. He had given Robert marching orders, if that were to happen.
I want you to represent my ex-wife. I says, I'm not worried about myself. I says, I want her taken care of. I don't want her to spend a night in jail. If Belle, if she's arrested, I want bail. I'm going to get with Russ and Dad. I want bail immediately arranged. And I told him, I says, don't worry about defending me. I says, I want her defended. And he says, well, you know.
So what are you trying to say? That's where I'm going?
No. No, Rhonda, I'm not.
I can't deal with this level. I told you before, I can't deal with it again. The nightmare, the ash over all this bullshit. If they come and do that, I swear to God, I'm going to freak out.
Doug promised Rhonda if she were arrested, she would be out of jail within hours.
I don't care. It better not happen. I'll be so friggin' mad, you won't even... Oh, God. See sparks coming out of my face. Because he scared me. My voice started shaking, man. He says, hey, they sound like, they got some, and that cop told him, hey, I'm arresting his ex-wife and 3 other friends. And I just went, oh, that's good to know.
Well,
and he goes, well, what'd they say to you? And I go, nothing.
Rhonda, you had nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with it. None of my friends had anything to do with it. So you have nothing to worry about. All they're trying to do is shake something. They're trying to shake a tree and see if an apple will fall.
Oh, God, you sound like him.
Doug couldn't reassure his ex-wife, try as he might.
And I am making all the arrangements for him to be there for you and for, to be bailed out.
Oh, that's comforting, Doug.
Well, Rhonda, it may happen. It may happen.
I know, and that's real comforting to know. I want to go there again.
I was hoping you'd at least be comforted and know that I'm trying to do everything I can for you.
No, you're not.
Doug told Rhonda they could talk about it more in person on Sunday when she came to visit him. Their conversation was cut off anyhow, but he dialed Rhonda again first thing the next morning.
What are you wearing?
Huh?
What are you wearing?
When?
Now?
My pajamas.
Really?
Mm-hmm. What?
I just always like knowing you're wearing when I'm talking to you. I like the pictures.
This time around, he didn't mention the attorney, his appeal, or Joyce Yost. He simply reminded Rhonda of her plan to come down and visit him that weekend. And he told her to tune in to his favorite TV show later that night to see country music videos. Doug's favorites were Lori Morgan and Patti Loveless. But he had also just heard the Alabama song, Here We Are, from their 1990 album, Pass It On Down.
I listened to the words to it really close yesterday, and it fits you and I to a T except for one line.
The chorus of that song goes, "We had to break it all down to build it back up, lean on each other when the times got rough. How we survived going through so much, baby, you and I could write a book about love." As for that one line Doug said didn't fit, we're still together after all this time. Rhonda followed through on her promise to visit Doug on that Sunday, June 16th. Doug was almost up to 200 pounds, the extra weight in the form of muscle. Rhonda complimented him, saying, "You look good." He said, "So do you." Then he asked if she had watched the country music videos. Rhonda said she had. He said Patty Loveless was beautiful, and Rhonda resembled her.
It's kind of interesting because Rhonda's pretty nervous.
Doug didn't know it, but Terry Carpenter was also hearing his sweet talk. Rhonda had agreed to wear a recording device into the prison.
I have one that we have hidden up in a bra strap on Rhonda.
It transmitted in real time to a receiver, which Terry had with him, in an observation room just above the prison's outdoor visiting area.
And the location that I'm in, I'm able to be up above them and looking down into the room that they're in.
Terry had also wired Rhonda with a backup standalone recorder that was strapped to one of her thighs.
There's a couple of times that Doug would try to put his arm around her and she'd slap his arm away, and he'd try to reach over and put his arm on her leg and she'd slap it away. And he'd look at her like, "What's the matter with you?"
Rhonda went on chatting. This was mostly performative, a show of normalcy, of boring routine for the other people scattered about the visiting area. Doug dropped the pretense once it seemed no one was paying them any attention. He leaned in and asked Rhonda if he were charged with Joyce's murder, would she testify?
Honestly, Ronnie, it crossed my mind, but I didn't believe it. I just took this shit on phone, testifying against me. And I couldn't speak on there.
That's pretty garbled, but Doug said, "I just couldn't picture you sitting on the stand testifying against me. And I couldn't see Tom doing it either." Much of this audio from the wire recording will be difficult to understand. I'll interpret as necessary. Doug reassured Rhonda he had never and would never tell anybody the truth of what he had done to Joyce. In fact, he said he had lied to his therapist, Kate Delapiana, to throw her off the scent. And he said if the police tried to arrest Rhonda, he would take care of it, just as he had with the poaching charge. Rhonda said she didn't want to go through it, to have everyone at work talking about her.
I don't want to go through. You hear me? I don't want to go. I don't want to come into work again. Leave at the phone. Everybody's going to find out again, and I'm going to talk to work. I can't deal with this level.
An exasperated Doug asked Rhonda just what she wanted him to do about it. How could he reassure her? Her answer was simple: tell the truth. Doug said that was not an option. If he came clean and admitted what he had done to Joyce, both the rape and the murder, it would mean his life.
I committed a first-degree felony to cover another felony. It's the death penalty. At the very least, they're going to give me his life without parole. If I cooperate with them and go to him, they're going to give me life without parole.
I committed a first-degree felony to cover another felony. It's the death penalty. Rhonda said she didn't understand. After all, murderers cut deals all the time. He would probably just do an extra 5 years or something. No, Doug said. There's a big difference between something like manslaughter, say when two guys are in a brawl and it goes too far, and what he had done to Joyce. I planned to kill Joyce. I planned to end Joyce's life. That's premeditated capital homicide. Doug had just confessed to murdering Joyce Yost on tape. Rhonda asked if Doug believed in an afterlife. He said he did.
And Rhonda says to him, Doug, you realize that your mom now knows that you killed Joyce. And his comment is, my mom knows now a lot worse about me than just Joyce.
Mom now knows far worse about me than that. And I know I at least have the satisfaction of knowing that when Mom passed on, that I was correcting my life. I was doing everything I could now to correct my life, you know. And Mom knew that I was pretty happy, you know, and I believe that she believed that.
Mom now knows far worse about me things than that. For the second time in just a matter of weeks, Doug seemed to imply his raping and murdering Joyce was not the worst thing he had ever done.
You tell me what can be worse than killing somebody if he hasn't killed multiple people.
What about Joyce's body? Rhonda asked if someone might have found it. No chance, Doug said. He alone knew where it was. He said he hoped to someday share that location with his therapist, Kate, so Joyce's family could have closure. But only if he could do it on his terms, in a way where he would be protected. Otherwise, it would be the death penalty. Which brought Doug back around to the question of who could possibly testify against him. So, what about it, Rhonda?
I want to know straight up. If, you know, we're bad, I mean, and it could get heavy on it. Are you going to ever testify against me?
Are you gonna ever testify against me? Rhonda said no, unless she had to. If she ended up in jail, he had better start talking. At this, Doug laughed. Police were fools, he said. He had embarrassed them after the poaching arrest, and he would do it again. But this was good. He felt reassured. He had looked Rhonda in the eyes and heard her say she was not going to talk.
But I just wanted to hear from you. Look at you. Hear it. Without testifying.
Soon, he promised, everything would be back to the way it was before. He wanted to be out with her. He was sorry for their hard times. But he was correcting himself and would be back to the nymphomaniac he was at 17 years old.
I want to be out there with you, Rhonda. I want you out there too, Joe. I mean, I want us out there. I want to be husband and wife again. And I'll be honest with you, it'd break my heart if you ever got married again. Because I know that no two people are more right for each other than you and I. And I know I had some hard times out there, and I know that I took some bad things out on you, and I'm sorry. I can tell you that I'm correcting all that now. And I'm going to be back to myself where I was when I was 16, 17 years old. Yeah, I was a nymphomaniac back then.
Doug vowed to shower her with sweet, sweet romance. He told his ex-wife, the woman who alone could undo him with her testimony, she was his future. Rhonda responded by saying, then tell. Doug said if he told the truth, they wouldn't have a future together. Telling the truth was his final straw.
Tell the truth. Well, then we never have a future. Yes, we will. We'll let your lawyer find out what happened. Just say, what if by chance something comes out? I mean, make it vague, just say, what if I did do what would happen, okay? I mean, that's the final straw. That isn't something I have to deal with now.
If it came down to that, if Doug were cornered and forced to admit he had killed Joyce, he promised Rhonda he would not reveal her role.
Now, if I come forward and tell the truth, I'm all going to be on the news. I don't want that. If I ever did tell the truth, Rhonda, I would never say that you knew anything about it, ever. Okay?
What's more, when he got out, Doug said he would be a reformed man. No more sleeping around, no more girlfriends, only Rhonda.
You know, I feel more loving. And I feel more romantic. I believe when I see it, I'm going to come into your arms, like I said, like a freight train.
I'm coming to you like a freight train. When they stood to leave, Doug planted Rhonda with a kiss. Later that night, after Rhonda had returned home from the prison, she received a phone call.
I want to treat you like a lady and make you feel like a woman. 24 hours, day and night. Scary.
It was Doug.
Well, listen, thanks for coming down today. Did it help you any? Yeah. It helped me tremendous. I mean, there's a couple of things I needed to hear from you. And I believe it. And it helped me a lot. And I meant everything I said to you, Rhonda.
That included, Doug said, a promise to be together with Rhonda, Alicia, and Cody as a complete family.
Get ready for a train, okay?
Yeah, a kiss blew me away. Huh?
Because you're going to have a loose one on your hand.
Your kiss blew me away.
The kiss.
The kiss was nice. I got goosebumps. I did,
Yeah, it made me sweat.
The following weekend, on Saturday, June 22nd, he phoned Rhonda again.
When are you going to come down and see me again?
Maybe tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow?
Yeah.
All right. That'd be neat, huh?
Uh-huh.
The recordings Rhonda made of these phone calls captured many conversations like this between Doug and the kids. I've chosen not to share almost any of that, out of consideration for their young ages and personal privacy. The clips I am using here are only included because they provide important context regarding Doug, his methods of persuading Rhonda to visit him, and his knowledge of the backcountry. To that last point, Doug asked Alicia if she had enjoyed her time with her biological father the prior weekend. She said, "Not really."
Did you go up Ogden Canyon to camp?
We went, I don't know. But we went out there and couldn't find a place to camp, so we just went back to his house.
Doug presumed it must have been too crowded for Alicia's father. Doug said it would have gone differently had he been there. He knew how to get off the beaten path.
Can you remember ever camping with me when you was little?
No.
Can't you really, honey? That's too bad. Gosh, me and you and Mom used to go up to some doozy places, honey. We used to four-wheel drive all the way up the mountain.
I remember some of them, like going up there and getting stuck.
Yeah, we did that, too. Can you remember spending the night in the creek? Remember the truck got stuck in the middle of the creek? This little river, and we had to spend the night in the truck, and we was right in the middle of the creek.
Had to sleep in the truck.
That was a time I'll never forget, honey. Believe it or not, I had a lot of fun. That's camping to me. I hate being around other people. When I get in the mountains, I don't like being around other people. It's not like camping.
Doug told Alicia he would try to arrange for her to go visit his dad's cabin just as soon as the rest of the family could get together. When Rhonda came back on the phone, Doug asked if she had read the articles he had sent to her.
Yep.
What'd you think?
Sounds good.
It does, huh?
Yep.
As I explained earlier, they dealt with a Utah Supreme Court decision and a lawsuit filed by a state prison inmate. Taken together, Doug believed they meant the State Board of Pardons would not be able to ask him about or even consider Joyce's disappearance when he came up for a parole hearing.
They don't have the power anymore. The Supreme Court took it away from us. It's like they all like, and they went, whoa!
Yeah, they had too much, I think.
Yeah, they got way too much. Man, what they've been doing with people here is bullshit.
Getting the articles to Rhonda and getting her to read them had taken no small effort on Doug's part. Now he wanted the newspaper clippings back for his own files.
Can you send me those articles back, though?
Yeah.
And in parting, he reminded Rhonda of his favorite Saturday night event.
Hey, you know what comes on at 10?
Oh, God. What?
My country videos,
I know, what? Who?
Doug said Restless Heart would be on, but they probably wouldn't play his favorite song. Roseanne Cash would sing her latest. Her hit single at the time was a song titled What We Really Want. Rhonda would like it, Doug said. The opening verse went like this. We tried to make ourselves pay for something we've never done. We threw the best parts of life away on street talk, strangers, and drugs. What we really want is love. What we really need is love. If you or someone you know has endured rape, sexual assault, or sexual abuse of any kind, help is available. In the United States, you can call 1-800-656-HOPE or visit rainn.org to connect with free resources through the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. No one need suffer in silence. You are not alone. If you haven't already, please subscribe to or follow Cold to make sure you get every episode. You can also interact with me and the Cold team on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Cold Podcast. Cold is researched and written by Dave Cawley, with editorial oversight by executive producer Cheryl Worsley. Additional executive producers include Paul Anderson, Nick Piniella, and Andrew Greenwood. Audio production by Nina Ernest. Mixing by Trent Sell. Michael Bonmiller composed the main score. Special thanks to the team at Amazon Music. Full credits for each episode are available at thecoldpodcast.com. Cold is an Amazon original by KSL Podcasts in association with Workhouse Media. Thank you for listening.